everybody, and welcome to my live stream about Azure Stack, or sorry, not Azure Stack, Azure Arc enabled servers. Do let me know if you can hear me. It'd be good to get a shout out in the chat if you can hear what I'm saying. So I would appreciate that. Yeah, so thank you for joining me. It's been a long time since I did a live stream on my channel. I think I haven't done one this year in 2024. So yeah, it's great to be here and to try something with you all and to talk about a topic that we have had quite a lot of engagement on the channel about. So yeah, welcome everybody. And this is definitely going to be a kind of interactive session. I'm watching the chat. I'm trying to man everything myself today. So I'm going to do some slides and talk about some context around Azure Arc enabled servers. But I do want to hear from you. I want to hear your questions. I want to hear your thoughts about Azure Arc enabled servers. Have you had any issues? Do you have any questions about why you want to use this? So yeah, post them in the chat and we will break into them during this session. So yeah, let's get some started with some of the content that I prepared to try and share some information with you. So yeah, let's switch over to my slides. So yeah, today I want to try and talk a bit about hybrid cloud, a bit about Azure Arc, then Azure Arc enabled servers, which is just one of the kind of components of Azure Arc. There's lots of use cases for it. Talk a bit about SQL Server and how that works with Azure Arc. Then we'll talk on the famous subject or much loved subject around extended security updates for Windows Server and SQL Server. And then last but not least, we will get onto some Azure Arc agent troubleshooting tips and talk about that. But yeah, do post some questions. I do want to hear from you. So yeah, let's get interacting together, folks, and chatting about stuff. So yeah, Microsoft have really realized that all cloud IT environment is far from a reality, right? So most organizations are going to look at hybrid. And I think when we look at some of the stats, and I think this stat here was from 2022, it basically showed that yes, lots of people are using cloud, but lots of people are also staying on-prem and are still using things that are there for them for variety of reasons. Like lots of industries have workloads that cannot move to the cloud for regulatory, I can never say that word properly, regulatory reasons. And as an industry, as an IT industry, we are starting to see about 2/3 of enterprises adopt that hybrid approach and really invest not only in the cloud, but also in their on-prem environment and try and look at how they can evolve their IT as a whole and not just stay on the, Windows Server 2008 servers that they have and try and form that. And ultimately, the kind of way Azure was formed and the principles that it was formed on is flexibility and choice and allowing customers to use whatever they want, whether that be inside Azure, whether that be hybrid, whether it be multi-cloud, or yeah, a combination of all of those. And this is really where Azure Arc came about. So as we think about Azure Arc and Azure as a cloud, it's important to frame that cloud is both an architecture and an operation model. So Azure is a resilient, scalable platform for your workloads, as I'm sure lots of you already know. But it allows you to build new services and build apps and top up everything on top of that with the management and operation solutions that we enable. So yeah, at the same time, we shouldn't be restrictive about our innovation. So ultimately, that's why a lot of customers are going to the cloud, trying to use the innovation that's there. AI is the big buzzword that everybody's talking about. So yeah, lots of people are moving to that. But as I said, regulatory compliance needs maybe even specific application latency requirements or just keeping up to date with the competition and what they're doing means that hybrid is the kind of strategy that a lot of customers are going for and using that right combination as well. And really, that's where Azure Arc comes into play, because for those that are using public cloud, they're looking at using those cloud services. They want to be able to extend that potentially to their on-prem environment, and they don't want their on-prem environment to stay static at the bottom end of that. So Azure Arc comes into play because it's a bridge that extends the Azure platform, so you can build applications and services with the flexibility to run across data centers, the edge, or multi-cloud environments. Azure Arc also helps provide that consistent deployment, allows you to have consistent operations and the consistent security model for everything that you're managing. So it can be that one-stop shop or single pane of glass, and I hate that kind of buzzword phrase, but it can be that single pane of glass for you to be able to use the same tools, the same security, the same governance technologies, and start to build up that knowledge and that kind of consistency within your environment. And just like in Azure data centers, a subset of Azure services for application, data, and AI are there to be used both new and existing hardware, virtualizations, and Kubernetes platforms, IoT devices, and integrated systems. So although we're talking about Azure Arc enabled servers today, there's a lot more with the Azure Arc and use it. And we're seeing customers start to take Azure Arc and use it for running some AI workloads or application or data workloads or even IoT, as I said, in their own environment for whatever reasons that they have. So yeah, like I said, Azure Arc allows you to have that kind of one-stop shop for consistency around your operations management. So you have that single set of tools and skills that you use to build up what's happening inside your environment. So as your teams kind of skill up on using cloud, they can start to use those skills, those new skills that they're taking, and take them to other areas. So you might have multi-clouds. You might be using Azure, Amazon Web Services, or Google Cloud Platform, or even your own on-prem data center, and start to extend the kind of tools that you're using to secure your Azure environment elsewhere as well. So yeah, you can really extend your cloud services, extend that operating model that you've designed for cloud back onto on-prem, and make sure that things aren't, waylaying behind, or you have multiple tools for the same job. So there's lots and lots of benefits there as well. If anybody's got any questions, do pop them in the chat and we'll try and get to them. But yeah, hopefully you're enjoying this chat and understanding where I'm going with the whole Azure Arc explainer. So yeah, like I say, we want to focus on Azure Arc enabled servers because I think that's one of the big key points that everybody has been using it for lately. And this is the capability that allows you to manage your Windows and Linux physical servers, virtual machines, or virtual machines that are hosted outside of Azure. So anything that doesn't run already on Azure, you can install the Azure Arc agent and then turn it into an Azure Arc agent enabled server, ultimately allowing you to control things with that central management. So being able to have that centralized agent management tool, everything will be seen inside the portal. So an Azure Arc enabled server appears inside your Azure portal, just like an Azure virtual machine that you've spun up is there. And that gives you that consistency, enabling you to really understand what's going on and use consistent tools like Azure Policy, Azure Defender for Cloud, Azure Update Management, Microsoft Sentinel, Azure Monitor. There's lots and lots of different tools there that you can use to do that. And when this non-Azure virtual machine has the Azure Arc agent installed, it's become a hybrid machine that's connected to Azure, and it becomes a connected machine and is treated as a resource in Azure. So each connected machine has a resource ID, just like all your Azure resources have as well. So that's what it gives you, that consistency, and it turns it ultimately into something that Azure can see for you. So if we have a look at the big picture, so Azure allows us to take advantage of that huge scale and security with the ability to use services such as Azure Policy for the governments, or even Azure Auto Manage to automatically apply security baselines to your virtual machines and keep them secure. And this is really just showing you how to extend all of those services. I know I've mentioned some of them already, but there's things like Azure Key Vault, you've got Azure Automation, Azure Tags, Azure Resource Graph for your queries, and being able to query everything and pull out all of the information that you're having. So yeah, I think there's a question in the chat. So when you add a physical tin server to Arc, does it automatically appear to your VNet? So no, that's kind of not how that works. So let me kind of show up the next slide, which is talking about networking, that might actually help explain that and answer that question for you. So what happens with Azure Arc enabled servers is you install an agent on that physical server that you have in your own data center, for example, and then it needs to connect to the Azure portal or the Azure resource management to be able to do that connection, that kind of communication of inbound and outbound. Now, you can do that a couple of ways. So you can have that direct connection through the internet. So it's all on port 443 through the internet. And that is all encrypted traffic and through the public internet. Now, for a lot of customers, that's maybe not ideal because of security requirements. But for other customers, that's absolutely okay for them to do that. So your Azure Arc enabled server doesn't actually peer with your VNet at all. It's just communicating with the Azure portal. And it doesn't have the same, it's not in a stretch VNet, unless, of course, that is how you've got your environment set up. The other option that you could use instead of pushing things straight through the public internet for your Azure Arc enabled servers to communicate is through a proxy server. So if you have a proxy server installed on-prem, you can configure your Arc agent to communicate through that, which would then go out through your internet pipe across the internet there. But one of the most common ones that we're kind of seeing customers use, just because of security or nervousness from the security teams, is actually using the Azure Arc agent and connecting it through ExpressRoute and site-to-site VPN, which then goes through then goes into your Azure VNet and then goes into your private links and your private endpoints and communicates that way. It doesn't necessarily give you open access to your servers. It doesn't necessarily become peered to that VNet as such, but it would communicate on that kind of traffic and that kind of way into your VNet as well. So yeah, hopefully that kind of explains the networking, but ultimately your Azure Arc agent needs to be able to communicate with the Azure portal inbound and outbound. So you can, as I say, there's three options there you can kind of use. You can use the public internet, you can do proxy through the internet, or you can use your ExpressRoute or your site-to-site VPN coupled with private endpoints as well through your VNet. So I've got another question in the chat and it says, if it is a virtual machine inside AWS, what information does Arc see? How does it tag resources in other clouds? So yeah, what would happen is you would get information around what that virtual machine is. So it would pull out things like the name of the virtual machine, the operating system of the virtual machine. It would pull out the IP address. There's a bunch of information that it pulls out by standard. So it's kind of the metadata of that server. It doesn't tell you like what it's got installed. It doesn't do a catalogue of your control panel. It's really just that metadata of what that server is and what it's doing. So kind of operating system, IP address, server name, that kind of thing. There's a bit more to that beyond that. But yeah, it's that kind of basic metadata of your server. It doesn't interrogate the data as such. So hopefully that answers your question. If we move on to think about SQL Server, because let's face it, a lot of our virtual machines on-prem will probably have SQL installed on it as well. Now, with Arc, you can manage all your SQL estate using Azure to get that single view of all your SQL servers in a central portal to better manage your inventory and licenses. So we also when you Arc enable your SQL servers, you also get access to the SQL Best Practice Analyzer to automatically evaluate your SQL server for things like security, performance, scalability, business continuity, and much more for no additional cost. So yeah, your SQL servers on Arc enabled servers ultimately become an Azure SQL IaaS resource. So the Arc agent provides that connection back to Azure so you can view and search your SQL inventory across on-prem and in Azure. So we're seeing a lot of people actually enjoy that status, especially for a lot of customers who maybe don't have a dedicated database administrator or DBA to help them with their SQL estate. The kind of free SQL assessment, the best practice analyzer, is giving them some food for thought around how they can better improve their SQL estate on-prem, or look at how they can build maybe even a business case for getting a DBA to actually be part of their team and convince their management that there's a lot of things that need to be improved across their on-prem SQL estate. So it's quite interesting, the use cases that we're seeing people have for that. So moving on to extended security updates. Now, this is a big one that I've been talking about for probably the last year or something. So if we have a look at the lifecycle management timelines. So yeah, we kind of started this kind of lifecycle management of SQL Server and Windows Server in 2022. So as you will be aware, lots of operating systems, lots of SQL Server versions go end of life and become not dead as such, but they do no longer get security updates. The software, the operating system still works for you absolutely fine. You can still run it, but you're no longer getting the monthly patches on Patch Tuesday. You're no longer getting those security updates without potentially having extended security update agreement with Microsoft. And previously you would buy that through volume licensing. You would have a look at that. However, what we've now seen people use is Azure Arc to be able to bring down those extended security updates. So last year we were talking to a lot of customers because Windows Server 2012 and SQL Server 2012 went end of life. And as such, lots of customers hadn't upgraded, hadn't thought about what their plans were going to be. So we had to help them onboard the servers into Azure Arc and then enable extended security updates so they could still receive patches and security updates for those SQL servers and Windows Server 2012. So ultimately what this new feature is all about is giving you the ability to pay as you go as you want for your extended security updates, or ESUs as we've shortened it down. So you would install the Azure Arc agent as you would for all your management capabilities, but there's also a feature and a subset feature inside of the Azure portal which allows you to buy extended security updates per server or per core as we license it, and then have that for a monthly kind of cadence. So you might need another month of security updates to allow you to have that regulatory compliance. But long term, you're trying to actually decommission that server or upgrade it to the next version of Windows Server or SQL Server. And that allows you to move on to that. So when you're doing it with Arc, it's kind of that pay-as-you-go model. So again, if you stopped pay for it at the end of, say, August, you wouldn't pay for it anymore. Traditionally, if you'd bought extended security updates, you'd be buying that for potentially a whole year and then still be paying for it even if the server had been decommissioned or updated. So yeah, we're seeing a lot of benefits with customers who are looking to use extended security updates and then plan for what they're going to do with Windows Server 2012, SQL Server 2012, and this year we've seen SQL 2014 go end of life as well. So there's a lot of benefits to being able to buy your extended security updates through the Azure Arc or Azure portal. But it all comes from having your servers Azure Arc enabled. Lots of customers have went for installing Azure Arc on their servers purely for extended security updates. But for me, well, that's a benefit and that allows you a lot of flexible billing and flexible savings. It doesn't give you the full capabilities that you can have using Azure Arc. So I really encourage people to not only Azure Arc enable their servers for extended security updates, but look at all of the other management tools, like I was saying, extending your security and governance kind of operations from Azure down onto Prem as well. So yeah, hopefully that's made some sense. It's definitely been a topic of conversation for the last year for me. So lots that I could share around that if there's any questions. While you're thinking about any questions that you may want to ask me, I just want to do a small plug for something that I do and have been doing for a number of years now. So I've got a small weekly podcast called Talking Tech with Techie Lass. And this is a kind of weekly podcast that I release every Friday or nearly every Friday. It's usually about 3 to 5 minutes long, and it's a news summary of the newest releases, any updates from Azure. So new services, things that are coming public preview, all sorts of things I talk about in that. And it's available on Apple Podcasts. It's available on YouTube as well, where you're watching me today. It's available on Spotify, or it's available as an RSS feed if you're using something else to listen to your podcasts. If you're not already subscribed, please do subscribe, folks. I really do appreciate the support. It may seem that just a 5-minute podcast doesn't take a lot of time and effort, but it does. I've invested a lot of time and money into equipment to make it the best that I can do and try and keep it very professional for you all. So yeah, please do subscribe to it. It's called Talking Tech with Techie Lass, and you can follow the link on screen if you want to grab that, or if you can just search for Talking Tech with Techie Lass on whatever podcast platform that you use. I would really, really appreciate that. And yeah, please do share it with your colleagues and peers if you enjoy it. Again, your support is very much appreciated as well. So I see we've got a question in the chat. So does it cover only virtual machine security? I mean the environment around it. So networking user permissions policies should be handled separately from all the other cloud tools. So I think if I understand that question correctly, you're asking about whether Azure Arc would look after the things that the AWS virtual machine have, so control the networking, the user permissions and policies. No, it wouldn't. It doesn't interrogate the AWS environment. If you Arc enable a virtual machine that lives in AWS, the Azure platform doesn't control networking. It doesn't control the permissions. You would be able to make some certain changes to that virtual machine through things like Azure policies, Azure security, so using Sentinel or Microsoft Defender for cloud, but it wouldn't change necessarily the settings inside the AWS portal. So it wouldn't change the VNet, you wouldn't be able to change the networking settings, that kind of thing. It just gives you visibility to manage certain things like patch management. So you could patch the server from Azure. You wouldn't have to go into the AWS portal to control it. You could remote control it, so you could RDP into the server from the Azure portal to AWS, assuming your networking connections are all set up and everything's working correctly. But yeah, it doesn't necessarily control all of that environment for you, so you wouldn't be able to go into the Azure portal and change your networking settings for your AWS virtual machine. It doesn't give you that level of control. It's more inside the VM that it gives you the control of, not outside of the VM. So hopefully that makes sense for you. So yeah, a big thing that I have been doing on top of everything over the last year is Azure Arc Agent troubleshooting. I've got some tips and tricks that I want to share with you. Some of them are fairly straightforward, but again, it depends on how involved you are with the Azure Arc Agent. But there's some tips that I want to share with you that might help. So when you install the Azure Arc Agent, there is a command line tool that's installed as well, and it's installed by default. You don't have to do anything specific. You don't have to tick a checkbox or anything. It's installed by default for you. And that's called the Azure Connected Machine Agent Command Line Tool, or the AZCM Agent is what you type into a command line. And it will help you configure, manage and troubleshoot that server with the Azure Arc connection and the Azure Arc Agent. So I think there's about 10 different flags that are available so as you can do things with that tool. So AZCM Agent, show AZCM Agent version, that kind of thing. You'll be able to interrogate it using that command line. Now, on your Windows operating system, the CLI tool is installed inside the program files, then Azure Connected Machine Agent folder, and then inside there you'll find the CLI tool. However, it's automatically added to your system path variable during the installation process. Sometimes you have to close and reopen your command line console if you've got that open during installation for the path kind of variable to refresh. But ultimately, you can type in AZCM agent into a command line, into your Windows terminal, whatever you're using, and then being able to interrogate it from there. And on a Linux operating system, exactly the same. You can open up, put in the command AZCM agent, and it's there for you. And I think by default it's installed in opt, and then AZCM agent bin, and then AZCM agent is where it is in a Linux system, I believe, if I'm remembering right. So one of the ones that I use all the time is AZCM agent show. Now, this is my go-to command before I start digging into any deeper troubleshooting or anything that I might be a bit confused about. It's a great tool because it gives you such a lot of information here. So as you can see, hopefully from the screen share, it's got a lot of information about the server. So it's showing me the resource name. So this is the name of the server. It's showing me the resource group name. So it's showing me which resource group this is connected to inside the Azure portal. So if I'm having trouble finding this server inside the Azure portal, I can go into that resource group and then try and find it. I've got the resource group ID, so I've blurred a lot of this out, obviously, for obvious reasons. But it gives you that long path. It gives you that resource ID that you can use. You can, again, try and find inside the Azure portal or connect to. It's confirming the subscription name, the tenant ID. So again, if you're like me, if you've maybe managed multiple tenants, if you've got access to multiple tenants or multiple subscriptions and you're not sure where this virtual machine is connected to, this command pulls that information up and shows you. So again, fantastic for just giving you that kind of go-to information that you need. It's also got important things like agent version. So what version of the agent have you got installed? Are you on the latest, the greatest? Are you expecting a feature to be there that's not there? Could it be because the agent version isn't the right agent version to be able to get access to that feature? Lots of useful information here. Also got like the agent status. So is this agent actually connected, and when was the last time? Did it do a heartbeat? Is it not sending the right information? All that kind of good stuff. And if there's any errors, they would display here as well. But yeah, there's lots of information here around the services. So when the Azure Arc agent is installed, it installs and configures a bunch of services in the background for you. Are these running? Are they not running? Could that be causing the issue that you're maybe trying to troubleshoot? Again, lots and lots of information here. And very last, but not by least, at the very bottom, if you're using extended security updates, it gives you a bit of a status update. Is this connected? Has it got a license? When was the last time did it connect? That kind of thing. There's lots of information in this. So this is my go-to command that I start with if I'm having any issues with the Azure Arc agent. AZCM agent show, and then I've got a whole bunch of information that 9 times out of 10 actually helps me troubleshoot what I'm trying to do, and I'll see a glaring error here, or something obvious that needs to be fixed here using this command, and that's me. I don't have to do anything else beyond that, other than fixing the issue, obviously. One of the other commands that we've got quite used to troubleshooting and using is the AZCM agent check command. And what this does is it runs a series of network connectivity checks to see if the agent can successfully communicate with the required networking endpoints that it needs. And as you can see from the screenshot, the output shows a table and the connectivity test results for each endpoint, including whether the agent is using a private endpoint, proxy server, or how it's using that. And this one is, again, another go-to command if people are having issues with the Azure Arc agent. As you can see, there's a bunch of URLs, and I don't think all of the URLs are necessarily tested in this command, but you can see there's a bunch there that are needed for the Azure Arc agent to be able to connect and communicate effectively and efficiently using the kind of portal. So if there's any of these that don't work, things aren't going to be right for you. You need to have all of these open and reachable from the Azure Arc agent, wherever it is, whether it's in AWS, whether it's in on-prem, they need to be able to communicate somehow. So this command really is quite useful, and it's just azcm agent check and then -- location, and then you specify the Azure location or Azure region that you're using for this connectivity. So yeah, really handy, again, really simple. It will show you if things aren't reachable or if they are reachable, and then you can start to do your troubleshooting elsewhere, or use this as a test connector if you're making changes through your firewall to a proxy, however it may be, for that connectivity to work. Now, when we updated the Azure Arc Agent version, so when version 1.41 came out, you now have the ability to actually check networking issues for some of your extensions. And again, the biggest one we've seen because of all of the extended security updates for SQL 2012 and 2014 is the SQL extension. And with the SQL extension, there's an additional bunch of URLs that are needed to be able to communicate with that, so that the SQL extension can actually work effectively and either help you with that best practice assessment that I talked about earlier, or to help you with the extended security updates and making sure they're getting visibility and being able to be applied. So yeah, this is another one you can use. So azcm agent check -- extensions, then you specify the extension name. So in this case, it's SQL or SQL. Then you do -- location, and then again specify the Azure region, and that will test the URLs, the endpoints that are needed to be able to access. And again, if any of those aren't reachable, then there is an issue and you need to try and resolve that by allowing things through your firewall, through the portal, or thinking about other things that are within your networking. So yeah, the azcm agent check command is another great one to be able to understand and remember. So my last kind of tip, or last kind of command that I like to use is the cm agent connect command. And this command ultimately is used to help you connect the server to Azure Arc. So if you're having to reconnect a server that's maybe not connected or has lost connectivity, or has failed to do the connectivity properly because of potentially a URL that wasn't allowed to communicate with it, you can manually try and configure it. So you can use the azcm agent connect command with a bunch of information after it to help you create that connection with the Azure Arc portal. So you'll need things like the tenant ID, subscription ID, resource group name. You'll need credentials as well. So you can either use an interactive kind of pop into Internet Explorer or Edge or whatever you have installed on your server, and connect it through that way, through your individual credentials if you have access. You could use service principals. There's lots of different ways you can connect it, but you do need to have a bunch of information. So this is a long command you'll be connecting, or right now, to be able to connect that Azure Arc agent. But yeah, azcm agent connect is one that is another fantastic one if you're trying to do something together. But as I said, the azcm agent command is your go-to. It's got about 10 different flags, as I said, to be able to help you understand what's happening, being able to troubleshoot your Azure Arc agent and make that changes that you might need to either change the configuration or fix something that's broken as well. So I've got a question here around, will it work through a proxy? So some of our clients are using proxy for outbound connections inside their enterprise networks. And yes, as I showed you earlier let me pull this back up, the Azure Arc agent, or it can absolutely connect through a proxy. It has to be an HTTP proxy at the moment. That is changing, but you can ultimately use a proxy to send the traffic through. And as we saw from the check command, there's probably about 7 or 8 URLs that it's using connect through. And you can use that through a proxy, and you can route your Azure Arc agent traffic through a proxy to connect if that's what you want to do. But yeah, we're seeing lots of customers actually use ExpressRoute and site-to-site VPN for that connectivity, as opposed to proxy. But again, it is an option there. You have those 3 different options: direct connection through the the internet, through a proxy, through the internet, or through ExpressRoute or your site-to-site VPN. So those are the options that we have at the moment for you to be able to connect. But there are some things that are coming to change that. So yeah, definitely tune into my weekly podcast, and I'll be announcing new updates whenever they come out, and you can catch up on those kind of feature additions that might be happening as well. So yeah, that's all I had today to show you folks. So yeah, is there any questions before we call it a day and say thank you to everybody for joining? I'm conscious there's a bit of a lag when I talk and then ask a question between you answering it. So I'm going to, yeah, just thank you all for joining, and say hopefully you've enjoyed this. Hopefully we can do more live streams. It's something that I do want to do. It's something I enjoy, being able to interact with you all live rather than just sending out videos on a weekly basis or whenever I try and get a video edited. But I'd like to try and do more live streams. So if you've got any ideas for live streams or how you want to do it, I have thought about just doing a random Q&A where you ask me anything about my life, about my career, about Azure, and we just catch up. But I don't know if that's something folk would want to do. But yeah, let me know. You can get in touch with me, as you can see on the screen, if I point in the right way. Yeah, if you look on the screen, you've got all my kind of information. So you can get me here on YouTube. You can get me on Twitter, or X as it's called. You can follow me on Instagram. I'm active on Facebook. I've also got LinkedIn, which is not listed there. But yeah, folks, it's been fun. I do appreciate the support. I do like it when you join me on these kind of live streams. So hopefully we can, as I say, try and do more if I can schedule them in. But yeah, if there's no more questions, folks, thank you. And hopefully you've enjoyed this, and we'll catch you in something else in the future. So yeah, appreciate the support, folks, and have a good evening or day, wherever you are in the world.